at verse 22.
Yeah.
So just to give you a bit of context, Jacob, who is, of course, the cheat, the trickster, have cheated his brother Esau out of his blessing, and he's had to leave home to go and take sanctuary with his uncle Laban, where he discovered someone who would perhaps from whom he inherited some of the trickery skills. It's time now for Jacob to try and go back home, but he does not know how he is going to be received by his brother. And this is now literally the night before he finally crosses the river to go and see what the situation is like and how he's going to be received. So we begin at verse 22. The same night he got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maids, and his 11 children, and crossed the ford at the Jabbok. He took them and sent them across the stream, and likewise everything that he had. Jacob was left alone, and the man wrestled with him until daybreak. When the man saw that he did not prevail against Jacob, he struck him on the hip socket, and Jacob's hip was put out of joint as he wrestled with him. Then he said, "Let me go, for the day is breaking." But Jacob said, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." So he said to him, "What is your name?" And he said, "Jacob." Then the man said, "You shall no longer be called Jacob, but Israel, for you have striven with God and with humans and have prevailed." Then Jacob asked him, "Please tell me your name." But he said, "Why is it that you ask my name?" And there he blessed him. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "For I have seen God face to face, and yet my life is preserved." The sun rose upon him as he passed Peniel, limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the thigh muscle that is on the hip socket, because he struck Jacob on the hip socket and the thigh muscle. Amen. Thanks be to God for his words to us this morning. And I hand over to Angie.
Oh dear. Hi everyone. It's been a while since I've done a preach, it feels. So I'm a bit out of practice, I think. So hopefully this will all come together, and God will speak to us all through this. I feel Kath may have set me up a bit because I've been limping most of this lockdown with the dodgy knee, and I feel that she was just kind of like saying, "Hey, you could do this," and think what it might be saying to you now. And it has been talking to me as I've been reading this passage and thinking, oh, well, that's an interesting thought. I hadn't thought about that. But I guess it's also speaking to all of us at the moment. I used to love wrestling as a kid. I was a big, what was his name? Big Daddy or something. I used to sit there. That was the one thing I used to enjoy doing with my dad on a Saturday morning when we had to go and visit him, was to sit there and watch wrestling. My sister got really bored, but I got really into it and started to wrestle with her, and she'd really get upset and get cross and angry. So wrestling's always been a fascination for me, but I kind of like always didn't want to hurt anyone. It was more of a fun thing. It was like the brother-sister kind of like fights you used to have as a kid. And I guess I read this and I see the same kind of thing. God doesn't want to hurt Jacob. Jacob doesn't want to hurt God. but there is something to learn from this wrestling. What is it? What does God want from Jacob? And I guess the other question is, what does God want from us in our times of struggle, our times of darkness, our times of anxiousness? Throughout that wrestling match, Jacob couldn't overpower God, but God also could not overpower Jacob. But isn't that a bit weird? Because we believe that God can do anything. God could have won that fight hands down, but that's not what God was wanting. When I talk to youngsters about being a follower of Christ, and there's a big conversation about, well, you've just got to follow all the rules. And I go, well, you do, but we have to follow rules generally, don't we? We have rules we have to live by in society and stuff like that, but we're also given the choice to whether we obey them or not. And I guess for me, this is what this wrestling with God is all about. Because God isn't going to overpower our free will. Both Jacob and ourselves must freely yield to God. Have you noticed that in the reading, Jacob had sent his wives and his children and everyone on ahead, and he's left alone? For some of us, being left alone is a reality of life, living on our own, not having contact with ones we love, all those things. And particularly during lockdown, some of us have felt really alone. And I guess it's at this point, at those moments, just as for Jacob, at that point where God is his only hope. It is during those darkest days when we solely have only God to rely on, do we sometimes feel his presence with us greatly. It's a reminder that God is always with us. Yet during this wrestling match, God humbles Jacob, touches his hip. He becomes strained and weakened. Now, I've been trying to find this passage for the last 24 hours and I still can't find it. So I'm hoping one of you, more likely Juliet actually. So Juliet, if you've got this, type it in so that we all know. But I'm sure there's a passage where it says, it is in our weaknesses we become strong. I could have got that completely wrong and just imagined it, but I really believe that it is in our weaknesses when we, and only in that time, when we realize nothing else will help but our relationship with God. When we get down on our hands and knees and pray, when we just give in, when we stop fighting, and we know and sense the power of God in our lives. I've shared the story many times about my depression and my hopelessness and helplessness, and how God has come through and shown me his love and his compassion through his words, but also through his people. You guys, both in Southwater and at St Andrews, I have felt God's love. I have felt God's presence. How many of us are control freaks? How many of us really struggle to let go? This passage reminds us, though, that we have to hang on to God. God is there. God is here. The other part of this passage that I really enjoyed reading about and actually hadn't noticed before, partly because I don't really look at Old Testament stuff that much. When I preach, it's usually from the New Testament. So it's been quite exciting for me to look at the Old Testament and think about how it still relates to us today. And one of the things I noticed was about how Jacob has his name changed. And I hadn't really noticed it at all, but that name change is a massive deal. But our names identify who we are. I love reading. I don't know if you've been doing this, but over lockdown, I've done various quizzes on Facebook. Obviously, I've been so bored and obviously not been doing anything constructive at all. But I've done these silly name games which says, what does your name mean? Are you strong? Are you this? Are you that? And it's because our names are important to us. Our names were given to us from parents that have loved us, parents that have ideas about who we're going to be and want us to be strong and capable and all those things. And although I sometimes really hate my name, I wouldn't want to change it because my mum and dad gave it to me. It means something to them, just as your name will mean something to your parents. Just as the names you give your children, there was a reason behind it. But in this wrestling, one of the blessings that God gives Jacob is a new name. And this new name enables a new future. Situations that we endure and encounter every day in our lives don't matter. How we handle them now as followers of Christ, with God by our side, changes how it all feels. It's a blessing to know God with us. Jacob is blessed mightily knowing that God is by his side. And his name is changed to Israel. How exciting that in the New Testament we read a descendant of Israel also wrestled with God. In the darkness of the Garden of Gethsemane, Jesus finally yielding to his Father. When he prays, tears of blood, take this cup from me. But if it is your will, I will carry on. Finally, in that ultimate relinquishment of control, Jesus cries out to his Father, and into your hands I commit my spirit. The answers to our struggles is not that we get control of God, but we yield our lives to God. for God has overcome. For the forever and faithful God raises Jesus from the dead. And what I love, and I hadn't even put this two together, we see Jacob walk off with a limp, a scar, a battle wound, and he is able to share the message of God's presence in his life with others as he limps along. When Jesus comes back, he shows his scars, his battle wounds to those who need to see them. The doubting Thomas who needs to put his fingers in those holes. We all have battle scars. Some are hidden, some are there for all to see. But our scars tell a story of hope, a story of strength, a story of overcoming our struggles, a story of a new confidence and a new assurance with God by our side. You and I will have various struggles, but once we yield our lives to God, he will never let us go. He is with us always, and we can rely on his commitment to be with each and every one of us. So in our struggles today, in our fears and in our anxieties, let us stand tall, be proud of our scars. We know God is with each and every one of us. Amen. My handing back over to you, Kath.
Yeah, and you gave Juliet a challenge. I've got a couple of references. I don't know if Juliet found any.
There was a couple of notes.
2 Corinthians 1, which is where Paul says God's grace is sufficient in our weaknesses, is 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9. And it's interesting that just before that, in chapter 11, at verse 30, Paul says this: if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. So in 2 Corinthians 12, verse 9, God's grace is sufficient in our weaknesses, Paul says. And in the chapter before that, just a few verses before that, chapter 11, verse 30, if I must boast, I will boast of the things that show my weakness. I think that's quite an interesting thing, isn't it? That we forget that for the vast majority of people, our struggles can speak more eloquently into their lives than our successes. They want to learn from our limping, as Angie just said so powerfully. It's quite a challenge, isn't it, though, moving forward? We're coming into a time of prayer and intercession in a moment. It's quite difficult to understand that that's how God might want to work through us, because when we intercede before him, we're often asking for his blessing. I love the fact that in the middle of this wrestling match, and just after, when Jacob has seen God face to face, he finally, in the middle of all of this struggle and limping, he finally gets the blessing that he craved all along. This one wasn't stolen. This one was actually given to him, and his name is changed to Israel, one who has strived with God. And maybe we want to share some of that in a little time, how we've learned from our striving with God.